Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 114 of Fracking Nightmare, being broadcast from Plymouth on the evening of Thursday, 14th of December 2017. Now, this will be the last episode of Fracking Nightmare for the year, and unfortunately, I think we've only actually managed about 14 episodes of Fracking Nightmare during the past 12 months, primarily because I've been based at Kirby Misperton in North Yorkshire, and the round trip to Plymouth is about 700 miles, but by the time I've run a few other errands, it's about a 1,000-mile round trip. So it hasn't been as practicable as I might have liked, but I'm trying to compensate for that by doing a morning live stream. So now at 8:30 each morning, wherever I happen to be located, I'm doing a live stream, and you can watch these live streams on one of two Facebook channels. It depends which one I'm not banned from at the time. Currently, the Ian Rowland Crane Facebook page has a ban on posting. So I have to use his doppelganger, Ian R. Crane. But it's also going out live on my YouTube channel, which is the Ian R. Crane channel, which you can see on the screen here. And this literally goes out live at 8:30 in the morning, raw and uncut, and trying to address the topical issues associated with this insidious industry. Now, we're come to the end of the year, and we look at the finances, and I have to say I am extremely grateful to those people who have contributed to my running costs through the year, and also to those people who have purchased copies of Voices from the Gas Fields, the surplus of which goes straight back into the fracking awareness campaign. So if you feel that you would like to continue to support my activities, then you'll find on frackingnightmare.com, on the left-hand side of the page there's the opportunity to either make a one-off donation or a regular contribution, or buy copies of Voices from the Gas Fields and distribute them around your local community, because the critical element is breaking beyond the existing anti-fracking community and reaching out to new blood, new audiences, which is certainly happening as the industry tries to establish a larger footprint, and then people are suddenly waking up to the fact that all of a sudden this is in their backyard. In fact, I had a phone call during the week from somebody who lives just a few miles south of Moulton, probably barely more than 10 miles away from Kirby Misperton. And believe it or not, fracking was not on their radar, despite the fact that it's had significant coverage in the local press in North Yorkshire. For whatever reason, it had gone straight over this person's head, but then they had discovered that they lived in an INEOS licensed area. And so after just 2 hours of research, they had decided that this was not something that they were prepared to tolerate in their community, and that person has now become very active in trying to raise awareness in their village. So it's never too late. So tonight I'm going to focus very much on what's occurring at Kirby Misperton, because on the 8th of November, Third Energy, but of course this is Barclays Bank trading as Third Energy. Barclays Bank did own, earlier in the year, they owned 97% of Third Energy, so it was effectively a wholly owned subsidiary. They have divested some of that, so they are now a 78% owner of Third Energy. So to all intents and purposes, this is Barclays Bank trading as Third Energy. So if we can bring up the picture here on screen, what you see here is the aerial shot of an extremely rammed frac pad. Now, this pad, and what we're looking at here, if I can get my mouse onto the screen, there we go. What we've got here, this is the frac pad. This is KM8. So this is an existing well. This is KMA. This is a conventional well. And this is producing gas, and that gas is fed to Third Energy's generating plant at Knapton, a few miles to the east. Now, this is a processing plant here, down in this corner. Whoop, let's go back. This is a processing plant down in this corner here, and the well is here. Now, up until about 3 months ago, this pad was pretty much empty. It just had the wellhead from the well that was drilled in 2013. And then from September the 25th, this equipment was moved on site. Now, this is quite possibly the most rammed frac pad I have ever seen. So what we have here, the blue tanks, these are water tanks. So there's 19 of these tanks on the site. What we have here are the pumps, and it's these pumps that will pump the water mixed with the chemicals and the sand. You can't really see the sand. These are the sand hoppers here. But this will be mixed in a blender and then pumped down the well to fracture the geology. Now, to all intents and purposes, Third Energy had all this kit on site on November the 8th, and they submitted their request to the Secretary of State, Greg Clark, for permission to go ahead and unleash the frac fluid beneath the community of Kirby Misperton. Well, here we are, some 5.5 weeks later, and Greg Clark has still not granted permission for Barclays Bank, trading as Third Energy, to frac this well site. So this is Greg Clark, and let me just introduce him to you. If you haven't come across him before, he's the MP for Tunbridge Wells in Kent, but he originally hails from Middlesbrough. So he's actually a Teesside boy, but perhaps he had the Teesside savvy sucked out of him when he attended Magdalen University in Cambridge. And he went on to get his PhD, I believe, at the London School of Economics. He spent some time working at the BBC before entering Parliament in 2005. So he's been in Parliament for 12 years. But he's quite a young man. He's, I think, 50 years of age. And reports from Westminster suggest that he is quietly ambitious. So I can take that as an indication that he has aspirations to ultimately, in his political career, lead the Tory party and potentially even enter number 10. Now, Greg Clark is smart enough to realise that putting his signature onto the permission for the first frac to be conducted in this country since the moratorium was lifted in December 2012 is a political grenade. And certainly, from November the 8th, a whole raft of documentation has been submitted to Greg Clark to try to educate him and make him realise that all the guff, all the BS, all the wash that has been pushed down his throat by the unconventional gas industry and by the Oil and Gas Authority is not necessarily the whole story. Let's go back and take a look at this well site here, because one of the real concerns is the health and safety aspects associated with this well site. First of all, the well site is completely surrounded by a fence. And on this part of the pad, now this is slightly higher than this part here, it's a mezzanine, but what Third Energy have constructed, it was originally going to be a sound wall, 3 containers high. But in reality, what it is it's a row of containers all the way around with scaffolding in front of them and then this screen built around them. So this isn't a sound wall, it's a sight wall. It's to prevent prying eyes from observing what's occurring on the pad. But there's a problem, because although there's a couple of pedestrian exits, one here and one down here, to all intents and purposes, there is no way of exiting the site in the event of an emergency other than down here, down the ramp onto this other pad. And because this site is so rammed, there is no possibility of emergency vehicles actually getting into where they need to get to in the event of dealing with either a blowout or, God forbid, but a serious injury. So this has been effectively designed either by somebody who really just didn't really have any knowledge or insight into health and safety aspects of a frac pad, or they knew all along, but they realized that the pad is too small, because this pad was not designed to be a frac pad. It was drilled as a conventional well. In fact, the government's own documentation still shows that this well was drilled as a conventional well, which explains why John Dewar told the previous MP for the area, Anne McIntosh, that he had no intention of fracking at Kirby Misperton. Of course, we now know that either he wasn't being completely honest, or events conspired to change so that he decided he was going to frack it. Well, putting all this equipment onto that pad is really about as much as it could possibly take, but it's not safe. Under any circumstances, any health and safety professional looking at this frac pad would just put their hands on their head and say, you have got to be absolutely kidding me. So, Greg Clark, amongst many, many other issues, are you really going to sign off on something that has all the hallmarks of being a total disaster? You know, it's a cowboy company, no experience. Okay, you can argue that Halliburton, who are on site here, you know, and they have the experience of fracking. Well, you can argue that you know, you've put it in the best possible hands, but even Halliburton's track record isn't absolutely rock solid, is it? I mean, just take a look at the BP Deepwater Horizon disaster, amongst others, and the blowout in the Texas Panhandle a year or so later on a frac pad. So things can go very, very wrong, but this is one frac pad that I certainly wouldn't want to be anywhere near once they start powering up the pump. So, Greg Clark, you completely understand that your political future is at stake here. And that's what you get for taking on such a senior role as the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Now, a couple of weeks ago, it was announced that there was a loophole in the Infrastructure Act, and that loophole would have to be closed, because that loophole actually meant that Barclays Bank, trading as Third Energy, could have fracked at Kirby Misperton without your permission, and actually they wouldn't have been in breach of the prevailing legislation because of this loophole, apparently. Well, Third Energy would probably say, yeah, we knew that, but you know, we wanted to do the right thing. Well, I hope that's the case. It's more likely that they just didn't know, and so just didn't actually realise that they had that opportunity until you told them. But really, by then it was too late. So you went to Parliament the following day with your amendments to ensure that this well site at Kirby Misperton, with a well that was drilled prior to 2016, would be covered by the Infrastructure Act. But it seems that you also made a slight amendment so that you tried to duck the responsibility for signing off on this pad and handed it off to the Oil and Gas Authority. Now, for the vast majority of people, of course, they would automatically and understandably assume that the Oil and Gas Authority is effectively a regulatory body that is responsible to the government, and it's completely independent. Well, let's just take a look at this. Here's the Oil and Gas Authority, the registration, its company number 09666, no comment, 504. It is an active, private, limited company, incorporated on the 1st of July 2015. Now, the objectives of the Oil and Gas Authority are as such. The Oil and Gas Authority's role is to regulate, influence and promote the UK oil and gas industry in order to achieve their statutory principal objective of maximising the economic recovery of the UK's oil and gas resources. So, do the Oil and Gas Authority have any real interest in taking account of the opposition's viewpoint? Are they really interested in the potential environmental impact down the road? Are they interested in the impact on human or livestock health? No, that's not in their objectives. Their objective is to maximise the economic recovery of UK's oil and gas resources without any limitation, apparently. Well, let's have a look at who's on the leadership team. This is the oil and gas leadership team. And we see here that the chief executive over here on the top left is Dr. Andy Samuel. So let's have a look at the background of Dr. Andy Samuel. This is the synopsis on the Oil and Gas Authority's own website. It says that Andy Samuel was appointed to the role in January 2015, and he joined the Oil and Gas Authority as chief executive. He previously held senior positions within the oil and gas industry, including 20 years with BG Group. The last 2 as Managing Director, Europe Exploration and Production. Now, I don't know what he was doing before that, but BG Group owns or used to own QGC, which is the Queensland Gas Company. And the Queensland Gas Company has been responsible for the devastation in southern Queensland, as shown in my documentary, which is nearly 3 years old now, Voices from the Gas Fields. Now, BG Group have subsequently sold QGC onto Shell, so it's no longer their responsibility. But, is there any prospect that somebody who has been associated with BG Group for 20 years would have been unaware of what BG Group, trading as QGC, was doing in southern Queensland? And no doubt, his expertise in that area is currently being brought to bear on the Oil and Gas Authority. So that's the leadership team headed up by Dr. Andy Samuel. But let's take a look at the board of directors. So here's the board of directors. And of course, Andy Samuel, as the chief executive, also sits on the board of directors. But who's the chairman? The chairman is Sir Patrick Brown. And we'll take a look at Sir Patrick Brown in just a second. But there's 2 other directors. And it's this one here that I want to draw your attention to, Rebecca Valance, because she is the shareholder representative director. Now, I haven't been able to find a job description, so I'm not sure what shareholder representative director implies, but not stakeholder, shareholder. So we'll take a look in a little while at who the shareholder is for this private limited company. Well, let's go back and take a look at Patrick Brown. And I've just noticed an error on the slide here. Of course, it's not Andy Samuel, it's Patrick Brown. But Sir Patrick Brown has held various positions in the Department for Trade and the Department of the Environment, becoming second permanent secretary and chief executive of the property service agencies in 1990. He was permanent secretary of the Department for Transport from 91 to 97, so ostensibly a career civil servant. But he's been subsequently very well rewarded because he has had various directorships. He was also director of Northumberland Water, which is in the running to be dealing with the frack waste in the northwest at Brand Sands, just outside Redcar. But he is also currently a director of Camelot UK Lotteries Limited. Well, as somebody observed when they read this, he's now obviously managing a lottery of a different kind. And that lottery is whether your community has the bejesus fracked out of it by these cowboy outfits who are waiting on the signature of the Oil and Gas Authority, because Greg Clark has deflected the responsibility and said that the Oil and Gas Authority will be responsible ultimately for signing off on whether or not Barclays Bank, trading as Third Energy, actually have the permission to go ahead with the frack at Kirby Misperton. Nice try, Greg. The Oil and Gas Authority has a sole shareholder. And guess who that shareholder is? Take a look at this. That shareholder is the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. And it just so happens that the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy is none other than Greg Clark. So there's Greg, desperate to distance himself from this poison chalice of signing off on this first frack by hiding behind the Oil and Gas Authority when the Oil and Gas Authority is his responsibility. And in the legislation, apparently, it now says that the Oil and Gas Authority must take account of the Secretary of State's recommendation. Well, you can't dodge it, Greg. It's your responsibility. And anyone who tries to suggest anything else is simply being deceptive and creating a smokescreen. It's your baby. You drew the short straw when you took on the role of Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. So right now, the UK awaits to see whether you will do the right thing. You have so much information on your desk. And of course, I'm absolutely certain that you have enormous pressure from the oil and gas industry. I'm sure Jim Ratcliffe is on the phone saying, come on, Greg, just get on with it. Just push the button. Let's see what you're made of. Well, you know what? Let's indeed see what you're made of. Can you stand up to the pressure from the likes of Jim Ratcliffe, from the likes of Barclays Bank, who are desperate to see this frack get underway, to get some flow rate returns and then sell it to the likes of INEOS? Well, it's going to be a very interesting Christmas. I somehow doubt that you're going to sleep too easily in the coming weeks. And if you make the mistake of signing this off, then you are not going to sleep easy for the next, well, probably decade, because this can take a long time to manifest. And the reality is this is just one well. And you know fine well that if this well does get anything like the flow rates that Third Energy claim they're going to get, then you know that it's going to kick this industry off right across the whole of the north of England. You know, I'm grateful to Russell Scott, a wonderful campaigner in North Yorkshire, for reminding me of this from July. The fracking firms struggling and feel beaten up. So they claimed in a meeting with the Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. They said they're struggling with finance from British banks, they're struggling with PR, they're struggling to get MPs on board, they're certainly not getting the communities on board. So why would you do it? Why would you indeed? Well, even tonight, and by the way, Third Energy have yet to submit, once again, their accounts. They are, I think, they are 2 months late. And by all rights, any other business who has failed to submit their accounts by Monday of next week would effectively be put into mandatory dissolution or taken into administration. But that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? Because all this kit is sitting on the well site. And at a conservative estimate, this is costing somebody about £100,000 a day to have the kit and the specialist crew sitting in the area just waiting for a signature to be able to kick this off. Wow, I wouldn't want to be in your shoes, Greg, right now. Well, actually, I would, because I would just kick this into touch and make it very clear that this industry has no place in this country, and particularly when you've got cowboys piling this amount of kit onto a frack site in the full knowledge that there is no way that this can be considered to be a safe working environment. By the way, I heard that Third Energy, on responding to the local community's concerns that there was no emergency plan in place, suggested that they might set up a telephone tree. This is the mentality of like a parent-teacher association in the school, not an oil and gas company that is looking to conduct a frack, none of which have been successful in the UK to date. Meanwhile, tonight, there was a meeting at Rydale, the offices of Rydale District Council, and this is the local community who turned up to the meeting to try and persuade Rydale District Council to engage a consultant to help them with their consultation on the minerals and waste plan for North Yorkshire, because obviously the waste is going to be very significant. And this again is where Third Energy have demonstrated that the industry works on the basis of just asking for what it thinks it can get away with and putting forward a plan that it knows it has not a cat's chance in hell of keeping to. And so right up until very recently, Third Energy were always maintaining that they would use the flowback waste from the first frack, they would treat it on site and then minimise their use of fresh water, minimise the waste by reusing it for the second and subsequent fracks. Well, I called out right from the get-go and I said, that's complete tosh. It's hogwash. It cannot happen. They need fresh water for each stage of the frack, because any contaminants, any abrasives in the water will have the impact of reducing the pressure at the bottom of the well. Well, lo and behold, Third Energy have now put their hand up and said, actually, treating the waste on site is not practicable. Well, first of all, where are you going to put the treatment facilities? Because there's no room on that pad. But the reality is that isn't going to happen. And so now they are stating that they need to be able to remove the waste off-site to a suitable treatment facility. Yet to be named. Where is this suitable treatment facility? Brand Sands is one possibility, which is a treatment facility owned by Northumbria Water. Another one is the treatment facility at Nostrop on the edge of Leeds. Meanwhile, across the other side of the Pennines, Quadrilla have requested permission to not just take the waste off site, which they're going to have to do, but to also dispose of the surface water collecting on the pad by just pumping it into a local brook. Now, this is absurd. This is completely absurd. The reality is that Quadrilla have real problems on that pad. First of all, it's been built at a very low point, and it's been built right at the point where ancient watercourses merge. So no real surprise to anybody who's done their research in the watercourses of the area that the pad would be flooded. Now, coupled with which, Quadrilla seem to have had a problem with the aquifer that they drilled through. That aquifer seems to have been pressurized at a somewhat greater pressure than they were prepared for, and hasn't helped with the surface water situation. And we've seen photographs a few weeks ago where the combination was such that the pad was so flooded that the water was overflowing onto the adjoining meadows. Well, now Quadrilla have sought permission to simply pump it into a brook, but this completely negates the need for putting the liner under the pad. The purpose of the liner is to completely contain all water, so that anything that gets spilled into that water is then contained and then can be taken away and treated elsewhere. So this again is mission creep, and it's asking Lancashire County Council for permission to simply pump the water into an adjoining brook without any third-party oversight. Of course, Quadrilla have also asked Lancashire County Council for permission, which has been granted, to run convoys at night. Now, although the permission seems to be based on one convoy in a 3-month period, that convoy could be up to 70 vehicles. And Quadrilla claim that this is necessary to avoid the protector community that has a constant presence at the gates. So, Greg, what have you got yourself into? You know, you must have drawn the short straw when the jobs were being dished out by Theresa after the last election. Meanwhile, if you go down to Kirkby Misperton, and you know, the atmosphere at the gates, I'm told, is absolutely fantastic right now. And here you see Jackie and Jim with their new T-van. And this was the first day of the T-van being in operation. But as you can see, it was being nicely kettled by North Yorkshire Police, who were actually threatening to have it towed away. And they called out the North Yorkshire County Council Highways Department to come and move it. Well, fortunately, North Yorkshire County Council Highways Department realised that there might be a little bit of an incident if they pursued that request. And so, discretion being the better part of valour, decided that provided it was moved a little further up the road at the end of the day, they would leave it in place. But the police have always claimed they don't have a problem with it, and that it would be North Yorkshire County Council that would have a problem. But North Yorkshire County Council stated categorically that it was the police that had asked them to move it. So, you know, another case of everybody doing this. Meanwhile, in South Yorkshire, North Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire, IGAS and INEOS are looking to establish their presence. Now, this is some 50, 60 miles, maybe even a bit further actually, south of Kirkby Misperton. And here, INEOS, who have their injunction in place, were invited to participate in a debate with the local anti-fracking campaigners. And so Tom Pickering of INEOS duly showed up, and apparently his performance was somewhat less than impressive. In fact, somebody observed that he didn't seem to really care. You know, I guess that Tom Pickering and INEOS are working on the basis that it really doesn't matter what the community think, because they're going to do it anyway. So all they've got to do is humour the community, turn up for a debate, spout forward a few palliatives in the hope that you know, they might register, and then just sort of wait for the permission to be granted, and off they go. Well, the debate was such that it was a unanimous victory for the opponents of INEOS. In fact, there is a video online which shows the chairman, who was the local MP, calling for a vote at the end of the debate, and as far as I can see, not a single hand went up in support of INEOS rocking up into the area and drilling an exploratory well. Well, of course, INEOS have also really upset the community by stating that they are no longer going to allow due process to take its natural course. They have applied directly to the Secretary of State for permission to have their request handled by a public inquiry. Now, this is somewhat disingenuous because it was INEOS that effectively requested a delay because they were well aware that the planning officer was going to recommend that the application be rejected. So INEOS requested more time to be able to consider some of the details of their application. But clearly, they've decided that the likelihood of the planning officer recommending that they be granted permission was slim to none, so they'll just usurp that basic democratic process and go straight to the Secretary of State. So now there will be public inquiries next year, but I think INEOS know fine well that the communities are going to actually rise up and do whatever it is they can to prevent this permission being granted. And this is a screenshot of Woodset's village newsletter, where the front page says the parish council will strongly object to the INEOS application. Well, it's the same in Rydale. Every district council and every town council in Rydale has rejected the presence of the unconventional gas industry, but of course North Yorkshire County Council overturned that after some duress from central government. INEOS, of course, also have an injunction in place where they have literally tried to shut down all dissent. And in the original application for the injunction, that included any dissent online or verbal against their operations. But fortunately, the challenge of Joe Boyd and Joe Corry has at least successfully removed that from the injunction. But there is still an injunction in place against any action that would cause delay or loss to INEOS. Now, that ruling is being challenged, and both Joe Corry and Joe Boyd have submitted, through their legal teams, they've submitted their application for the right to appeal. And although Joe Corry is funding his own challenge, Joe Boyd is totally reliant on the crowd justice campaign. So if you want to support Joe, who's a little over halfway, in fact £1 over halfway to his £30,000 goal, then go to Stop the INEOS Fracking Injunction and make a donation to Joe's crowd justice campaign. What we are experiencing in the UK right now is the rampant rise of a corporatist state. A state where the rule of law is effectively superseded by the corporations establishing court rulings which operate above the prevailing legislation. This is an absurdity, and this is why this injunction must be challenged. And of course, Jim Ratcliffe, as the owner of INEOS, has now control of a significant chunk of the UK's oil and gas infrastructure. It is Jim Ratcliffe and INEOS that owns the Forties pipeline that has now been shut down for 2 weeks plus to deal with a hairline crack. And, I'm sure that Jim Ratcliffe and his leadership team were celebrating with a champagne breakfast the other day, because whilst I'm not for one moment suggesting that they would have caused this leak deliberately, that was probably thanks to BP's poor maintenance program whilst they owned the pipeline. But nonetheless, it's extremely fortuitous, because it now allows all the apologists for unconventional gas to raise their arms and say, yes, this is why we need unconventional gas. It's why we need fracking to get underway in the UK, because we're too reliant on this pipeline. Well, we've been reliant on this pipeline for best part of 60 years. INEOS own it for barely a few weeks, and then it has to be shut down. So let's see how that goes. Somehow I sense that Jim Ratcliffe has designs on being the UK's answer to Roman Abramovich, which might explain why he bought FC Lucerne a few weeks ago to establish his credentials in the oligarch arena. Of course, he already owns a couple of super yachts, one of which is the Hampshire 2, which he purchased for 130 million after coincidentally blackmailing the British government into giving him 130 million to keep the Grangemouth refinery open when the trades unions were fighting to protect the terms and conditions of their members at Grangemouth 4 years ago. And subsequently, INEOS made a somewhat crass video bragging about how they had curtailed the influence of Unite at the Grangemouth refinery. So the 134 million that Jim Ratcliffe got from the British government, and then coincidentally he buys a yacht for 130 million, and the running costs are 4 million per year. So that seems like a reasonable deal, doesn't it? Well, Jim Ratcliffe's personal wealth is listed as £5.5 billion, which coincidentally is roughly equal to the INEOS debt burden. So in a smaller company, that might be regarded as embezzlement. But, when you are running a company the size of INEOS, and when the banks need you more than you need them, then it seems that you can get away with this kind of stunt. So everything I'm sharing with you is all in the public domain. There's nothing here that is hidden from view. All it requires is for people to do their own research. And I'm pleased to say that every time this industry announces that it has a particular focus on an area and a target community, then all of a sudden, all the seeds that have been sown over the last few years by the anti-fracking campaigners start to germinate. And right now across North Derbyshire and South Yorkshire, those seeds are germinating at a phenomenal rate. And of course, Tom Pickering and Jim Ratcliffe think that their injunction is going to protect them from any opposition or any meaningful opposition. It'll just be people standing at the roadside waving banners or writing to their MP or writing to the press. Meanwhile, they'll just roll into town and do what it is that they are determined to do. But boy, have we got news for you, because I think you're going to be a little bit surprised at the magnitude of the opposition that you're going to face, because your injunction has helped to raise the profile of the corporatist agenda and the sociopaths who are trying to push through an agenda that has zero social license and is totally reliant on a minister who is ambitious and wants to ensure that his future political career isn't tarnished by signing off on a well that could potentially trigger seismic activity, water pollution, soil pollution, air contamination, negative impact on human health, negative impact on livestock, impact on unborn children, causing stillbirths, causing lower than normal birth weights, which are known to potentially lead to other conditions manifesting. So basically, this is an industry that has nothing going for it at all. So good luck, Greg. Good luck. We're on your case. It doesn't matter how you try and dodge this. It's going to come back on your shoulders. And this is going to be a millstone that you are going to have to bear for the rest of your political and possibly natural life if this industry goes ahead and it leaves the same legacy as it's left everywhere else on the planet where it's established a presence. Well, that's pretty much it for tonight. This is the last episode for 2017. So it looks like we're going to finish 2017 frack-free. Hopefully, if Greg Clark has an attack of conscience or has the desire to protect his political career, he will do the right thing, and maybe we'll see the end of this industry once and for all. I'm not holding my breath on that. I have a nasty feeling that 2018 is going to be a tough year for us, but we're determined to make sure that it's an even tougher year for the unconventional gas industry throughout the UK, wherever you think you can roll into town. So thanks for joining me tonight, and feel free to join me in the mornings at 8:30, either on Facebook or on YouTube, or catch up later in the day with an update for all things related to fracking and our desire to see an end to this industry in the UK. Thanks and good night.